Have you ever stopped to think about, the invisible rules that govern our relationships, or why different cultures define family and relatives so differently? It's actually far more complex and honestly fascinating than it might seem at first glance, isn't it? Today, we're taking a real deep dive into the intricate world of kinship. It's like the very fabric of human society. We've pulled together some incredible sources, ethnographic studies from remote tribes, modern anthropological theories, really trying to uncover the surprising truths about how we connect.
Yeah, and our mission today is really to unpack the fundamental structures, the kind of hidden logic behind kinship systems across the globe. We want to help you understand not just what these systems are, but really why they matter and how they shape our lives day to day. We'll explore how kinship provides order, how it helps resolve conflict, and even how it adapts to, well, our modern world.
Get ready for some genuine aha moments, I think. We're exploring everything from, ancient tribal customs right up to the impact of modern tech on how we define who's family. Okay, let's unpack this. So, to really grasp kinship, we need to think beyond just our immediate family, right? Beyond the family tree.
Exactly. It's a fundamental system. It places individuals into social groups based on these ties, sometimes real, sometimes assumed, and assigns rights, duties, even influences where you live. It's the social glue, really.
And what's fascinating is how these systems maintain order even without a formal government.
Absolutely. Take the Nuer tribe of South Sudan. Ivan Spichard studied them back in the 1930s, 40s. They use what's called a segmentary lineage system. It's a classic
Right.
example.
A segmentary lineage system. Okay,
Yeah.
how does that actually work on the ground?
Well, it's hierarchical. You have clans, which segment into maximal lineages. Then those break down into minimal lineages.
Mhm.
In societies without a central political authority, stateless societies, this structure is paramount. People who are genealogically closer tend to live near each other. And crucially, your position in a conflict depends entirely on how close you are genealogically to the people involved.
Okay, so it sounds like a really clever way to manage disputes. Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine a fight breaks out, just between two individuals, say person one and person two, from the same minimal lineage. The system says basically nobody else gets involved. It's contained.
Right.
But if the fight is between individuals from different maximal lineages, say person one from lineage A and person three from lineage B,
Then what happens?
then there can person two for person one and person four for person three, they automatically unite with them. The circle of conflict expands based on lineage distance.
Ah, I see. And it can keep expanding.
Exactly. If an even larger conflict erupts, say between different maximal lineages entirely, then even broader groups unite. People who might normally oppose each other suddenly find themselves on the same side. This is what anthropologists call complementary opposition. Alliances are fluid. They're context-dependent. It shifts based on who the opposition is.
So if an outsider attacks like a neighboring tribe, everyone unites, all the newer. They just forget their internal squabbles.
Pretty much, yeah. For that moment, the larger threat overrides the internal divisions. It's a really powerful mechanism for group survival and unity.
It really makes you think, isn't it? How a society can achieve that kind of solidarity without a formal government, just through kinship rules.
And it's not just limited to, tribal societies in Africa. Andre Betha actually used this exact idea, complementary opposition, to look at caste conflicts in India. In Sripuram, down in Tamil Nadu, he observed how Brahmins, even though they're internally divided into maybe 20 subgroups, would be seen as one single unit by non-Brahmins when there was a conflict between them, and vice versa. It depends entirely on the context of the fight.
Wow. Okay, so if kinship is this foundational, this powerful,
Right.
what are the universal building blocks? Are there some core principles all societies rely on to build these structures?
Well, Robin Fox, who was a key structuralist thinker, argued exactly that. He said every society has to meet four fundamental conditions, sort of prerequisites, to create and sustain kinship structures. And the way they meet these conditions is what shapes the specific kind of kinship system they end up with.
Okay, lay them out for us. What are these four universal conditions?
Right, so first, there needs to be some kind of arrangement for socially legitimate sex and procreation. Basically, men impregnate women. Second, there has to be an institution to help women bear and rear children and provide economic support because, well, child rearing often limits other work. Third, men control economic activity. This is often linked to providing for the women and children. Could be the woman's brother, could be her husband. And fourth, incest is tabooed. There have to be rules about who you can't mate with among your relatives. That shapes marriage patterns.
Exactly those four. And Fox suggested that patrilineal societies, where you trace descent through the father's line, often fulfill these four conditions, let's say, more straightforwardly with less inherent tension. And that might help explain why patrilineal is, statistically, the most common form of kinship system found around the world.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, let's dive into the core theoretical debates. You mentioned these competing grand theories trying to explain how kinship creates stability. Yeah, the big clash, essentially, is between descent theory and alliance theory. Let's start with descent theory. This was championed mostly by scholars like Meyer Fortes and Radcliffe-Brown. They were looking at these societies without formal states, seeing order, and figuring kinship ties must be the key, their core idea. Stability comes from unilinear descent groups, tracing lineage through one parent-only father or mother. This creates these really distinct, bonded groups, often tied to a specific territory.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier they act as a corporate entity.
Mhm.
What does that mean for the individual person in that group?
It means your individual identity is often, well, kind of secondary to the group's identity. You don't just act for yourself. Your actions reflect on the group. You share responsibilities. You have collective rights, especially concerning things like land. Outsiders tend to see the whole group as a single unit.
Right. And Meyer Fortes, you said he studied the Talensi in Ghana. He made an important distinction here.
Yes, absolutely crucial. He distinguished between filiation and descent. Filiation is simply about recognizing your legal parents. You have filiation with both your mother and father. It's more about the domestic emotional side of things.
Hmm.
But descent, for Fortes, was a jural concept that means legal or political. It's traced through one parent only, and that's what determines your primary social position, your political allegiances, your inheritance rights. It's the backbone of the public sphere, in a way.
And these descent theorists, they had a pretty controversial view on marriage, didn't they?
They really did. They tended to see marriage as ephemeral or even insignificant in the grand scheme of social structure. For them, it was mainly just a mechanism for having children and enforcing the incest taboo, making sure people married outside their descent group, exogamy. It created a bond between two individuals, maybe, but not the crucial links between groups.
Hmm. So what were the main criticisms of this view?
Well, several big ones. Critics said it massively downplayed the vital role marriage does play in creating alliances and connections between groups. It was also criticized for, frankly, portraying women almost as passive pawns or commodities, kind of caught between their father's lineage and their husband's without full social personhood. And the theory really struggled to explain societies that weren't strictly unilinear, those with bilinear or bilateral systems, where you trace connections through both sides.
Yeah, it does raise that question. Can you really understand kinship if you sideline marriage and essentially half the population's role? Okay, so what's the counter argument? The theory that puts marriage front and center.
Right. That brings us to alliance theory. And the big name here is Claude Lévi-Strauss. He was heavily influenced by Marcel Mauss's work on gift exchange.
Yeah.
Lévi-Strauss's core idea is completely different. The stability of social order is built primarily upon the exchange of women between kinship groups.
The supreme gift, I think you called it.
Exactly. He saw women as the supreme form of gift because their fertility is absolutely essential for the group's survival, its continuity. And like any important gift, it demands a reciprocal gift of equal value, which in this system is typically another woman exchanged back either immediately or down the line. This constant exchange creates lasting, multi-generational relationships between groups.
So what drives this exchange, according to Levi-Strauss?
Two key things. First, the incest taboo. He saw it not just as a negative rule, don't marry your sister, but as a positive force. It compelled you to give your sister or daughter away to someone in another group. It forces alliances. And second, reciprocity, the simple principle of give and take. It's the most basic way to establish and maintain continuous social relationships between groups that might otherwise be separate or even hostile.
And this exchange doesn't always look the same, right? There were different types.
Correct. Levi-Strauss distinguished between different systems. You have elementary or closed exchange systems. Here, the rules are very specific. They tell you who you cannot marry, but they also often prescribe who you should marry, or at least which group you should find a spouse in.
Okay.
This elementary exchange can be symmetric, a direct, immediate swap. Group A gives a woman to Group B, and Group B gives one back to Group A. Simple reciprocity. Or it can be asymmetric. The exchange is delayed and indirect. It forms a chain. A gives to B, B gives to C, C gives to D, and eventually maybe D gives back to A, closing the loop. Edmund Leach found this among the Kachin people.
And that asymmetric form often creates a hierarchy, doesn't it, between the givers and takers?
Yes, exactly. Like in North India, traditionally the bride takers are often seen as superior to the bride givers. It builds in a status difference.
And what about the other type?
The other main type is complex or open exchange. This is more like what we see in many Western societies. The kinship terms clearly tell you who you can't marry, parents, siblings, etc. But beyond those prohibitions, there's a very wide open pool of potential spouses to choose from. There's no prescription saying you must marry someone from group X.
Got it. Now, alliance theory wasn't without its critics either, was it?
No, definitely not. It also faced criticism, particularly for potentially objectifying women, by focusing so heavily on them as objects of exchange, almost overlooking their agency. And some argued it neglected the ongoing importance of descent and where people actually live, residence rules. But despite the criticisms, the core idea that marriage is a fundamental form of social exchange, creating alliances, remains incredibly influential in anthropology. You can't really discuss kinship without considering it.
Okay, so we've got these big theories, descent, alliance. Let's bring it down to the ground level a bit. Kinship isn't just abstract rules, it's about how people actually behave towards each other day to day and what they call each other.
Absolutely. Anthropologists talk about specific kinship usages or patterns of behavior that you see recurring across different cultures. They often serve specific social functions.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, one common one is avoidance. Certain relatives actively avoid each other. Radcliffe-Brown suggested this often happens between people of different generations, like a son-in-law and mother-in-law, to diffuse potential tension or awkwardness.
Right, like in some parts of India, a daughter-in-law might cover her face with a veil in front of her father-in-law.
Exactly. Tyler even thought this might stem from early matrilocal societies, where the husband moves to the wife's home, and he was seen as a sort of awkward outsider needing to show deference.
Oh, okay, what else?
Then you have the opposite, almost, the joking relationship. This involves playful teasing, sometimes quite sarcastic or even rude, between specific relatives. It's usually between people of the same generation, like a man and his wife's sister, or between cross cousins. It helps release tension in a different way, often signaling a more relaxed, equal relationship.
Makes sense. Any more peculiar ones?
Oh yeah. There's kuvad. This is sometimes called sympathetic pregnancy. It's where the husband mimics his pregnant wife's behaviors, sometimes even simulating labor pains, following dietary restrictions she has. You find it among some tribes in South America, and also among the Khasi in India who are matrilineal.
Wow. That's something. It kind of reminds me of those modern #wearpregnant social media posts or the big push for paternity leave. It's like a modern echo of showing solidarity, isn't it?
It really is. Tyler saw kuvad as a kind of matrilineal survival tactic, a way for the father to assert connection in a mother-centered system. Others saw it more symbolically. But the connection to modern empathy is striking.
Definitely. Okay, keep going.
Then there's amitate.
Yeah.
This refers to the specific rights and authority that a father's sister, your bua in Hindi, for example, might have in your family. In a patrilineal society, she might traditionally have the right to name her brother's children.
And the flip side
Is avunculate. That's the special relationship and obligations involving the mother's brother, the mama. He often plays a really important role, especially in matrilineal societies, but even in patrilineal ones. For instance, among Marwadi communities in India, the mama traditionally has a significant role, sometimes even helping with the dowry for his sister's daughter's wedding.
So why do these specific roles for the aunt and uncle exist?
They're often seen as ways to maintain important connections. Think about it. In many systems, either the mother leaves her family home upon marriage, or the father's sister leaves hers. Amitate and avunculate provide formal ways to keep those crucial links active across households and lineages. They bridge the gap created by marriage and residence rules.
Okay, and one more you mentioned.
Teinonomy. This is quite common. You hear it all the time without realizing the term. It's when you refer to an adult not by their own name, but through their child, like saying Sarah's dad instead of John.
Ah, right, like Tarak Mehta Tapoke Papa from the Indian show.
Exactly. Tyler thought this might be a holdover from matrilocal societies where the husband was an outsider, so he was identified through the link he created his child. Others suggested it could relate to politeness rules, status differences, or even just linguistic patterns.
Fascinating how these everyday things have deep roots. Okay, this leads perfectly into terminology, how we actually name our relatives. You said the labels hold secret messages.
They really do. The study of kinship terminology, the actual names and labels we use, is a huge field in anthropology. Early on, Lewis Henry Morgan made a basic distinction between classificatory systems, where one term covers many different relatives, like uncle covering father's brother, father's sister's husband, etc., and descriptive systems, which aim for unique terms for each relative. W.H.R. Rivers even thought these terms were like fossils, ancient social facts that reflected past marriage practices, even if those practices had died out.
But later anthropologists refined this, right? Like Kroeber.
Yes, Alfred Kroeber made some key points. He argued that kinship terms don't just exist randomly. They form a system, a coherent structure. He also challenged the strict classificatory descriptive divide, pointing out that all societies actually use a mix. We have descriptive terms for our immediate family, mother, father, brother, sister, but use classificatory terms for more distant relatives, cousin, aunt, uncle.
So what determines which terms a society uses? Kroeber identified some core principles.
He did. He outlined 8 determinants or principles that seem to underlie kinship terminology systems across the world. These are the criteria societies use, consciously or unconsciously, to group or separate relatives when naming them.
Okay, let's hear them.
1. Generation. Are they my generation, my parents' generation, my children's? 2. Lineality versus collaterality. Are they direct ancestors, descendants, linear, or off to the side, like cousins, collateral? 3. Sex of the relative, obvious one, aunt versus uncle. 4. Sex of the speaker. Some languages use different terms depending on whether male or female is speaking. 5. Bifurcation. This means distinguishing relatives based on which side of the family they're on through the mother or the father, like having different words for mother's brother and father's brother. 6. Relative age. Common in many cultures, distinguishing elder brother from younger brother, for example. 7. Consanguinity versus affinity. Are they related by blood, consanguineal, or by marriage, a final, your sister versus your sister-in-law? And 8. Address versus its reference. Do you use a different term when speaking to someone, mom, versus speaking about them, my mother?
Wow, so these aren't just random labels at all. They're incredibly precise linguistic tools encoding a society's logic about relationships.
Exactly. Though Kroeber himself controversially argued that the terminology system and actual kinship behaviors might exist somewhat independently, Radcliffe-Brown strongly disagreed, arguing they are deeply intertwined, which seems more intuitive to many.
Okay, so building on all this, G.P. Murdoch did a massive comparison.
Yes, George Peter Murdoch. He famously analyzed over 250 societies and categorized their kinship terminology systems into 6 global types. It's a way to see the major patterns worldwide.
This really shows the sheer range, doesn't it? Maybe give us a couple of contrasting examples from his 6.
Okay, you've got the Hawaiian system. It's the simplest, in a way. All relatives of the same sex and the same generation get the same term. So all your cousins are called the same thing as your brothers and sisters. Father and father's brother are called the same term. Mother and mother's sister, too. It lumps people together.
Which implies certain things about marriage rules, presumably, like no cousin marriage.
Generally, yes. If your cousin is called brother or sister, marrying them is usually out. Now, contrast that with the Sudanese system. It's the total opposite, the most descriptive. Theoretically, every single relative gets a unique term. Father, father's brother, all different. Father's sister, different. It makes incredibly fine distinctions.
And the one many Western listeners might know.
That's the Eskimo system. Here, the nuclear family gets unique descriptive terms. Mother, father, brother, sister. But beyond that, it becomes classificatory. All aunts are aunts, all uncles, uncle, all cousins, cousin, regardless of which side they're on or exactly how they're related.
So each system tells a story about how that society prioritizes certain relationships or structures its social world.
Precisely. The other systems, Omaha, Crow, Iroquois, have their own unique patterns, often linked to specific descent rules and marriage preferences, like cross-cousin marriage in the Iroquois system.
Okay, let's try and ground all this theory in a specific place. India seems like a perfect example, incredibly diverse kinship practices. Irrawaddy Carve did major work here, right?
Yes. Carve's work is foundational for understanding kinship in India. She argued you couldn't understand Indian kinship without looking at 3 key interacting factors. First, linguistic factors, the major language families, Indo-Aryan in the north, Dravidian in the south, correlate strongly with kinship patterns. Second, caste, which she saw as essentially an extended kin group, often defined by Gotra or lineage exogamy rules. And third, the local family system, joint, nuclear, extended, etc.
And based on these, she divided India into, 4 main kinship zones?
That's right, 4 major regions, each with a distinct flavor of kinship.
Let's start with the northern region. What are the key features there?
In the north, Carve found a strong emphasis on territoriality, connection to land and region. You have strict Gotra exogamy, especially among upper castes, who might avoid marrying into 4 different gotre, fathers, mothers, paternal grandmothers, maternal grandmothers, going back several generations. Lower castes might follow a simpler 2 gotra rule. You also often find village exogamy. You don't marry someone from your own village, because villagers are considered like birodari, or siblings. But alongside this exogamy, you have strict caste endogamy, marrying within your caste, and often hypergamy, women marrying into a slightly higher status family or subcaste.
And the terminology in the North?
Generally more descriptive. Clear distinctions between nuclear family members, different terms for different generations, and usually a very clear separation between blood relatives, consanguines, and relatives by marriage, Kennefi signs. For example, mama, for mother's brother, is distinct from fufa, for father's sister's husband.
Okay, now contrast that sharply with the southern region.
Big differences down south. Caste endogamy is still strong, but crucially, there's generally no gotra rule like in the north. Instead, what's very common are preferential marriages, especially cross-cousin marriage. Marrying your father's sister's daughter or your mother's brother's daughter is often preferred, even encouraged. Sometimes even uncle-niece marriage is practiced.
Why these specific cousin marriages?
Alliance theorists would say it ensures a continuous exchange of women between the same families over generations, creating very tight, enduring alliances. You're essentially renewing the bonds made in the previous generation. What's prohibited, though, is marrying your parallel cousins, father's brother's daughter or mother's sister's daughter, as they are considered like siblings, part of the same lineage. Levirate, marrying deceased brother's wife, is also usually prohibited.
And the terminology reflects this.
Yes, it's highly classificatory in the South. Terms often cut across generations. Your elder brother might be called by a term similar to father, your younger sister like daughter. And often there's no clear terminological distinction between blood relatives and relatives by marriage on the same side. Your mother's brother and your father's sister's husband might both be called mama. Your mother's brother's wife and your father's sister might both be atai. It reflects that ongoing alliance.
And the South also has matrilineal systems, right?
Yes, alongside patrilineal ones, you find matrilineal and matrilocal communities, like the Nayar traditionally, or the Kasi in the northeast, though I put them in the eastern zone. In a Kasi matrilocal system, the husband moves to his wife's home and is incorporated almost as a stranger initially.
Okay, what about the other zones quickly?
Central India is fascinating. It's a real mixture of northern and southern elements. You find communities practicing cross-cousin marriage right alongside communities, following northern Gotra rules and village exogamy. Marathas, for instance, show a blend. Rajputs might emphasize hypergamy and lineage purity like in the north. And the eastern region is largely characterized by tribal belts, like the Ho Samdal. They typically practice clan exogamy, marrying outside your own clan, and often allow cross-cousin marriages, sometimes with unique rules. The Northeast, as mentioned, has both matrilineal groups like the Kanzi and many patrilineal tribes.
It's an incredibly complex picture. So with all these elaborate rules and structures, what about individual choice? And how is kinship changing in our modern globalized world? Things feel less rigid now, maybe.
That's exactly what newer anthropological approaches tackle. This comes under the umbrella of culture of relatedness or new kinship studies, with key figures like Janet Karsten and David Schneider.
And what's the core idea there? How does it differ from the older theories?
It fundamentally challenges the idea that kinship is only determined by biological blood ties, consanguinity, or marriage affinity. Instead, it argues that kinship is often actively created and maintained through individual actions, choices, and practices, what Karsten calls the order of doing, rather than just the order of being biology.
Huh.
It's about relatedness as a process, not just a given state.
Can you give an example of this order of doing?
Karsten's own work in Malaysia is a classic example. She found that people create kinship through shared substance. This could be literal sharing food cooked on the same hearth makes people kin. Or even being breastfed by the same woman creates a milk kinship, making those children siblings unable to marry. Kinship is built through shared life and nurture.
That resonates so much today, doesn't it? When you think about things like assisted reproductive technologies, RT, surrogacy, IVF, donor eggs or sperm, even the possibility of 3-parent babies with mitochondrial donation.
Exactly. Who counts as the real mother or father in these complex biological scenarios? Or think about same-sex families or single-parent families by choice, or families formed through adoption or fostering.
Right.
In all these cases, the biological ties can be complex, ambiguous, or even absent according to traditional definitions. Kinship is increasingly defined and experienced through actions, caregiving, love, commitment, shared lives, the doing of kinship rather than just the biological being. It forces us to ask, how do we define family when biology gets complicated?
It really shifts the focus. Okay, let's tackle another challenging idea. The matrilineal puzzle. Sound intriguing.
It is. Audrey Richards coined the term. It refers to a kind of perceived structural tension, or puzzle, that seems to arise specifically in matrilineal societies, where descent and inheritance pass through the mother's line.
What's the puzzle? Patrilineal systems seem straightforward, right? Father has authority, passes it to son.
Exactly. In patrilineal systems, authority, usually male, and lineage membership are aligned in the household. But in matrilineal systems, the man who holds authority within the lineage, the woman's brother, typically the mother's brother or mama, is often not living in the same household as the children who will inherit that status or property through their mother.
Ah, I see the disconnect. Can you explain?
Okay, think about residence rules. If the society is also patrilocal, wife moves to husband's home, then the woman leaves her matrilineal kin. Her brother, who holds authority in her lineage, now has to exert control over his sister's children who live elsewhere with their father. It creates distance.
Right.
But if the society is matrilocal, husband moves to wife's home, then the woman stays with her kin, which seems better for the lineage. But now her brothers, the men who carry the lineage forward in terms of authority, are lost to their wives' households, living elsewhere. Either way, there's a potential separation between the uncle who holds authority and the nephews who inherit it.
So how do these societies solve this puzzle?
They have various strategies. Richards observed things like visiting husbands among the Bemba in Zambia. The husband doesn't live full-time with the wife and her kin. Malinowski described the Trobriand Islanders, where the mother's brother had significant authority over his sister's sons. Sometimes you see dual locality, where couples split their time between husbands and wife's kin locations. These societies function perfectly well.
Which raises a critical point, doesn't it? Is it really a puzzle, or is that just how it looks to us, coming from societies dominated by patrilineal thinking?
That's a key critique. Calling it a puzzle perhaps imposes a patrilineal norm as the default or easier way. Matrilineal societies have found perfectly workable, stable ways to organize themselves. It challenges our assumptions about how authority and inheritance must work.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, one final concept to tie things together, complementary filiation.
Yes, this is another important idea from Meyer Fortes, also from his study of the patrilineal talency.
So what does it highlight?
It highlights the fact that even in societies with very strict unilinear descent rules, like patrilineal, individuals still recognize and maintain important kinship links with relatives on the other side, the side through which they don't trace their main descent line. So in a patrilineal society, you still have significant socially recognized relationships with your mother's family, your mother's brother,
Yeah.
avunculate again,
Yeah.
your maternal grandparents, cousins on that side.
Why is that important? If descent is traced only through the father.
Fortes argued it's crucial for several reasons. First, it provides a kind of social and emotional insurance. In times of crisis or need, you might be able to turn to your mother's kin for help or support, even if they aren't part of your formal lineage group. Second, it offers a vital sense of individuality and independence. In societies where your identity can be heavily dominated by your descent group membership, having these distinct ties through complementary filiation gives you a unique personal network. Different members of the same patrilineage will have different sets of maternal kin, giving them slightly different social resources and identities. It acknowledges the whole person.
That's a powerful point. It reminds us that even within strict systems, human connection finds ways to flow beyond the formal rules. Wow, okay, what a journey we've been on. From the Nuer's really dynamic alliances, through all those intricate naming rules and marriage patterns in India, and right into these very modern questions about technology and choice. It's absolutely clear that kinship is so much more than just a simple family tree.
Definitely. We've seen how these systems create order, provide security, shape identity, but also how incredibly dynamic they are. They're constantly being shaped and reshaped by human actions, by cultural beliefs, economic shifts, new technologies. It's really a testament to the adaptability and the complexity of human social life.
So, thinking about all this, maybe the question for you listening is, how do you see your own family and relationships? How much is shaped by biology, by blood? How much by marriage and formal ties? And how much is really about the actions, the choices, the care, the shared experiences that you and your loved ones create together day in and day out?
Yeah, we really hope this deep dive encourages you to maybe look at the people around you, your own network, with a slightly different lens, to question some assumptions perhaps, and just appreciate that incredibly intricate, vital web of human connection that we call kinship.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of kinship. Keep exploring, keep questioning those assumptions, and keep making those meaningful connections. We'll catch you next time.